everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. We are at GameSound Con with organizer Brian Schmidt. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks so much.
We're back. It's been 3 years.
3 years since we were in person because COVID.
COVID, yeah. Well, let's not dwell on that.
Yes.
But it's great to be back. Well, I have an agenda here. My agenda is to come in and talk about audio, obviously, in games, which is what this is about.
That's what we do.
But just how, because when I first started talking about immersive audio, everybody said to me, oh, it's never going to take off. And I was like, stop. My son's 15. He's been using virtual headsets since they came out.
Right.
And he's been hearing things all around, mixed in binaural, and it's not going anywhere. Kids are growing up with this, and it's due to games. And now we've got systems where, you can have like these sound bars and not only project out the front,
they bounce off the
ceiling, pair of speakers. And they're hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
It's just seeing the industry change. It's for spatial audio and 3D immersive audio. That goes back like 40 years.
Yeah.
Where they were first using computers, and it took like 2 days of computation to generate 30 seconds of audio.
Yeah.
And now it's like, we can do it in real time on this thing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. And the newest PlayStation 5. It can do like 5,000 concurrent full 3D audio source. It's just a mother of a HRTF convolution engine. It's really exciting.
It's why I've been really trying to help people get into it. It's funny because people say, "Did you work for Dolby?" I was like, I don't even know anybody at Dolby. It's not about, to me, and it can be Dolby, it could be Sony, we could be talking about anything, but the reality is it's just the immersive experience.
Yeah, that's what, again, they wanted. Now I'm going to sound like a shill for Sony, but I'm not. In fact, I used to work for the Xbox.
Yeah.
But they really wanted to, what would it be like if we modeled, instead of a binaural recording of a rainstorm, we modeled raindrops? What would that sound like? And so the amount of power they put in wasn't necessarily that, we need to model this stuff like this right now, but what can we grow into? What is that kind of convolution power? Convolution reverbs, HRTFs, same thing. What can that do in the hand of an audio designer?
Sound particles, we talked to them last week at AES.
Yep,
and
they're back here.
They're back here. I just saw them. You were talking to Tony last week, and it's insane. Yeah, you could take 4 raindrops and then turn it into a rainstorm.
Yeah. That's pretty fun.
It's amazing. Well, thanks ever so much for putting it on again.
Thank you. I thought that with COVID, I'd be happy if I got like 70% of the people I had in 2019 last year. We're at 115% of what we were in 2019 here, and another 350 online. So this is like...
Congrats.
Yeah, it's been
great.
It's been fun.
We had a similar experience at AES. That was the most attended I've seen it in 15 years.
Wow.
I think people
are
dying to get out and interact and
see people's real faces and not have 500 milliseconds of latency during a conversation. Like, no, you go ahead. No, go ahead. Yep.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for stopping by.
So I'm here with Alistair Hurst of Dolby, and we're going to talk about Atmos. And I've been harping on about Atmos for ages. And the biggest thing for me is I keep telling people immersive audio is here to stay because it's already here with gamers. And here we are at GameSound Con. Alistair, thanks ever so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay.
I've done a lot of Dolby Atmos thing over the last 3 or 4 years. So our audience know about it, but we're just coming from a different perspective.
Okay.
Obviously with the gaming side, so let's try and connect it. Because one of the things I've been dealing with showcasing Dolby is that everybody's like, they always want to compare it with, Quad or 5.1 and how that never took off. And I just keep telling people it's too late, it's already here. Because my son's in his virtual world hearing sounds all around him. So
and so the big difference this time around also is that you can get Dolby Atmos on headphones, and we know that a huge percentage of gamers are listening to the games on headphones, right?
Sure.
So you can mix your game in Atmos, it'll work on the headphones, but then it'll fold down to 7.1 or 5.1 or stereo, right? So you can create your game and you'll know that, the presentation will be the best it can for whatever endpoint that you're going to play on. So the big announcement we're making this show is that we now have a Dolby Atmos plugin available for Unreal Engine. That now you can get Atmos running in the native Unreal Engine audio engine.
Perfect.
Right? And so the demo that we have here, this is Project Lyra, that comes from the Epic launcher, and we basically got this working in Atmos. It took 5 minutes. You just go to the spatialization.
Yeah.
You install the plugin first,
Great.
the new plugin, and then just select Atmos, and boom, all the objects and everything are now playing in Dolby Atmos.
Fantastic.
And so this demo, what that is you can go 2 on 2, and you can hear footsteps above you, behind you. You get the whole thing. So
Amazing.
That's what we're showing this particular demo.
Let's have a listen to it, even though I am not a gamer by any way or shape. Eric, you should be doing this.
What I want you to do is I want you to run out by these stairs, and I will go up above you and run around and shoot around you. I'm not going to kill you, but that way you can hear the spatialization.
I've never done this, but I'm doing it. I'm filming Eric.
Up the side. Okay, so you're gonna go around.
So you just stand right there. Go stand between the stairs here. Okay, now just wait right there. Turn. Yeah, I'll go find you now.
Yeah, I hear it over here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, now listen to the footsteps and the guns.
Oh yeah.
So what's happening, Eric?
So
Where are the footsteps?
I can hear him. I can hear him running around. Like right now, he's right here. He's right over here, shooting right over here.
Oh, I see. So he's down there.
Yeah. So he's shooting down there.
Yeah.
Now he's right over here.
And you notice the ricochets. You can hear the ricochets.
Yeah, I
you
can
hear
hear
the
the
bullets.
I can hear the splashback right here.
So they're coming from behind you.
Yeah. So the gunshots are here. The ricochet of the shot, the echo over here.
So if it shoots you, do you feel it?
That's Ready Player One status right there.
Did you feel that?
Yeah.
So that's what we do. So we have sound now that's all around you, above, so you can hear your enemies above you. You can hear when they're behind you. You can hear where the shots are coming. So as a player, we're feeding all this information to you.
Yeah.
So you're more aware of what's going on in the game. So that's one of the advantages of Atmos, right? And then on top of that, we can put the environments, and so really immerse you in that world that you're in by surrounding you with all the sound effects and the music. The medieval demo that we have here, we've remixed the music into spatial as well. So the music is actually playing mostly from behind you and above you. So we're leaving those front channels for the sound effects and everything. So it's sort of kind of pull you into that whole world.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass you back over. So this is good. So I've been telling people now, we've been talking about Atmos for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Because, I'm good, God rest his soul, Al Schmidt and Steve Genowick are very good friends of mine. They were the first people to really mix music in Atmos. They were doing it at Capitol maybe 5 or 6 years ago now.
Right.
And I remember that sort of started a little mini revolution. So I've been really helping to get music guys into this, guys and girls. And this is the proof of the pudding. I keep saying it's not going anywhere. Immersive audio is here. So you either want to mix music for immersive audio and be involved in this or don't. But personally...
Right, and so as people get their home theaters set up, right?
Yeah.
So they will invest in sound bars and surround sound. So they're expecting to hear, they're going to stream their shows, Lord of the Rings is in Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
They'll be able to listen to the music in Atmos, and they'll be able to play their games in Atmos.
Yeah.
In all these various scenarios, right?
Yeah, and it's hundreds of dollars now. It's not into the...
No, some of the sound bars are really good, and
Yeah.
they can bounce the height channels off of your ceiling, so
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to put height speakers up there. And you can have wireless surrounds, or they can bounce it off the walls to get it behind you. So there are a lot of solutions. And then, like I said, for gamers, headphones is key.
Yeah, it's all in binaural and you can hear it all around you.
That's right.
Insane. Really, really good. So, Dolby Atmos immersive sound is here to stay. How are you? Good?
Yeah.
Brian Trifon?
Yeah.
And Brian White. Both with the I, no Y, no Y.
Yes.
There's no Y. Have you having fun at GameSound Con?
Yeah.
Been good?
No, it's great. And we're excited. We're giving a keynote talk this afternoon.
I know, congrats.
Yeah, we're excited about that. A little anxious, but yeah.
It's been good to get back in person, right?
Yeah.
Last time we were here
Yeah.
was 2019.
I know,
And,
Brian Schmidt was saying this is like 20% bigger than it was last year.
Yeah.
Or pre-pandemic.
Pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So super excited to see everybody.
We had the same experience at AES in New York. It was bigger than it's been in ages.
Yeah.
I think we're just all excited to get out and
Absolutely,
be human
yeah.
beings again and
Get out of the
interact.
NAMM seemed as crowded as ever.
Yeah,
in
oh, yeah.
June. It was crazy. Yeah.
So there's going to be lots of producers and engineers and mixers that are watching this that are probably going, who are these guys? So could you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
So we are collectively known as Finishing Move. We mostly compose for video games, but we also do a lot of trailer music, TV, film, everything, that kind of stuff. But video games has kind of been our bread and butter for the last 10 years, hence GameSound Con.
How did you get your start?
How did we get our start? Well, so we both started as band guys, guitar players, of course, now reformed.
Yeah.
He came into it through USC guitar school kind of thing. I came into it from the side of like, I want to produce bands. I want to like mix records and things like that. And I did that for many, many years. And we met at a school that I was teaching at in the Bay Area. It was a Pro Tool school. Remember like pro schools, like where you get Avid certified and stuff like that?
Sure.
Maybe those still exist.
Who knows?
Anyways, we were both working there, and that's when we started working together on stuff. And we kind of got into composing at that time, started with advertisements, doing some sort of subcontracting for other composers, kind of got into games that way. And
one thing led to another, and so we got onto some of the Halo projects, and then things kind of, went from there. And so, since then we did Halo Wars 2, and then we did Borderlands 3, and recently we've been doing Microsoft's Flight Simulator, the Callisto Protocol, Grounded. Can't even remember what I
can't even remember what we were
it's sort of like the pace accelerated, and so it went from like teaching Pro Tools and teaching classes, and then we at some point were able to just make a really good leap.
So you're both guitar players. How much of it still involves any kind of guitar playing?
Not that much. Occasionally, I'm a big Malmsteen shred guitar. That's my childhood. So and I kind of collect Malmsteen strats. So there was one track for 15 seconds I got to do some boomer bends, on the Malmsteen Strat for Grounded. That was a recent project we did. But other than that,
are you writing on guitar, or is it all keys these days?
A lot of it's keyboard. It's
keyboard, a lot of sound design, heavy
musical sound design
processing of.
I've always wondered: is there any room for a guitar synth to trigger stuff, or do you just find it easier just to go?
I mean, we have tried. I've tried everything. I had
maybe you know of one now.
No, I don't.
Have you heard of the Zetar? Do you know what that is?
No, I'm going to find something out. This is good.
All right. It's Zetar is it was before there was Guitar Hero controllers. It was this MIDI controller where instead of strings, where each fret and string would meet, there's a button, and it's very sensitive. And then there's string triggers. And I bought this a long time ago, and it was too expensive, and it's terrible because all the frets. I mean, it's a great idea, but all the frets were evenly spaced at that point, and so a lifetime of guitar, you don't have that, intuition. So tried that. I've tried various MIDI pickups, but it's just easier.
Jam Origins works okay.
Yeah, the Jam Origin.
Tried that.
Yeah,
so maybe that's. I feel like sometimes it's just easier to either write or program it in.
Yeah.
Just sort of,
but you've got all those guitar skills that are being unused.
I mean, look, somebody make, please, a MIDI guitar that actually tracks and is expressive. That would be really amazing.
People keep trying.
Actually, that neural DSP Rabia, is that what it's called? It's
the Rabbi?
The most recent one. That has a guitar synth in it. It doesn't track.
Rabia is a guitar player that's on Anderson's channel.
Yeah. And it's and so he has a neural DSP amp plugin, and it has a guitar synth thing that's awesome. It sounds really good. You can't it tracks really well. It doesn't export MIDI or anything, but just for using it as a built-in thing, it's sick. It's so good. So
amazing.
That's I've been kind of messing with that, but it's more for just synth sounds, not writing.
Sorry to take you on this tangent, but I just keep thinking, as a predominantly a guitar player myself, I think, I could just imagine if I could just play it in so much quicker than,
Yeah.
because I'm a rudimentary piano player. I don't know about
Yeah.
you guys. I'm like,
No, I mean, we both are too. Like, I think that, you know, I mean, the good thing about piano is like you approach ideas differently.
Right.
So like I pick up a guitar and I'm just like, oh, master of puppets, you know, like that's right. Or like some pentatonic riff because that's how it's tuned, you know.
Yeah.
But piano, it's linearly laid out, and so you think differently and come up with different ideas, and so.
and often G, C, and D is quite interesting.
Yeah.
On a guitar, you're like, oh, I have to play these 3 chords again. But piano, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
just move one finger. That was nice.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just sort of lends itself to completely different voicings,
Right.
which I think when you're arranging stuff can help you sort of clear out the mud, you know, like if you were just constantly, you know, trying to. Although you can play some really cool piano chords on guitar, you know, if you
Sure.
if you
If you've got a good stretch.
if you've got a good stretch. Yeah.
So I suppose you're Pro Tools certified, used to teach it. Is that still your DAW?
No.
It's not.
No. Okay. So what are you using for?
So I use Logic, just like I've been using it for the last 15 years. I gotta say, I don't necessarily love it, but it's just I've built so many sounds in it, so many channel strips. I know how it works, and it just, you know, so that's just like sort of the best option of, you know, what I'm able to use at this point.
Yeah, so we use a combination of Logic, Ableton, and Reaper.
Yeah.
Everything
Okay.
goes into Reaper at the end,
end.
because it's a lot easier to kind of process sometimes it's like lots of assets for game implementation, and so Reaper just has some scripting stuff that kind of like quality of life stuff that doesn't really exist in any other DAW.
Is that because it's customizable and people have been writing things
Exactly.
specifically?
You can kind of, if you can imagine a workflow that you're like, oh man, I wish it did this. Probably somebody's already gone and done that. Or
Amazing.
you could pay someone to
Just write you a script
to
of
code
whatever
that
you need.
functionality
Yeah.
in like Lua or a scripting language. And so, you know, anytime, you know, we might have, you know, I need to export 50 or 100 assets in surround. I need them to be labeled in a very specific way.
Right.
And I just want to be able to hit a button and have that all rendered out and not
Fantastic.
hand labeling things as they go. So it makes a little bit more sense.
I think the last time we were here, the keynote speaker was also a Reaper user, wasn't he? I think so, yeah.
It's kind of like the modular synth of DAWs, like, because you can make it however you need to do with the scripting. You can just make it literally do whatever you need
Yeah,
it to do.
it's a learning curve. So like for a lot of people, like people will ask me like, what's the perfect DAW to use? And it's like, well, I use this, but like that's if you're not in for like a super deep learning curve, it's probably not the one. If you're like, yeah, I just want to like put some songs together and like,
Right.
you know, have a bunch of cool instruments that come with it. It's like,
I remember we interviewed Mick Gordon maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and he wrote mainly in FL Studio
Yeah.
and then just exported it. I can't remember whether it was to Cubase or Pro Tools, but he
Pro
exported
Tools,
it
yeah.
to Pro Tools.
Yeah.
But he was writing in FL Studio. Do you find that, is that another reason to Ableton?
oh yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like there's a sound and a workflow for each DAW. Like that you can, like I know especially with FL Studio, but Ableton, there are certain sound design sort of tasks that are easier or more sort of flow state in that than
More
they would be
intuitive.
Yeah.
in Logic, and
Yeah.
same with Reaper, same with Pro Tools.
I mean, and FL Studio has really great synths, like amazing synths that are interesting and different. So I mean, I get the reason like why a lot of people like to work in that, and then you know to if they have to do a more complicated mix, then bring it into Pro Tools or Reaper or something. But
It's usually what ends up happening is the limiting factor is Ableton, FL Studio, they don't handle video very well. So if you have video, especially longer than a minute that you need to export a picture, like those DAWs are not made like a Logic or Cubase or Pro Tools to like keep.
I mean, Avid's Avid. It's,
Yeah.
it's the number
Yeah.
one video editing, and
It's-
then they bought Pro
And
Tools.
so it's like you get like
Makes sense.
massive drift that nobody really can explain
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
So sometimes if it's like a long scene, it's like those usually get done in Logic where all the template is, and then exported to Reaper for mixing.
Great. Great. This is fantastic. So when's your keynote?
5:45, I think.
5:45.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are going to be visiting these gentlemen. Actually, it will be after this video comes out to go and check out Brian White's studio in Highland Park. So stay tuned for that.
Sweet.
So we're just saying how small the world is because
my father's David Page. He's one of the co-founders of the band Toto, and I have spent my entire life going between rock concerts and scoring stages. I'm also lucky enough that my godfather's James Newton Howard, so I've been able to see
that's a pretty
some
good
sessions.
godfather to have.
It's super fun. It's super cool. And then I went to school with a BA in Asian Studies, and I got my master's in English. So I helped translate with clients in mainland China, like Tencent, NetEase, and we do end-to-end post-audio production.
Is this your company?
This is, we work with Senior Vice President Paul Lipson. We're connected under Streamland Media and then under Formosa Group, and we're Formosa Interactive. So we do all interactive media content and specifically audio and music, whether you need VO, Foley, music, but specifically for our department, it is music, and we do everything from virtualized music, depending on the budget, to full-on scores with large orchestras.
Incredible.
So and it's been fantastic. We've been able to work in LA and around the world, depending on what's going on pandemic-wise, and it's
so
just been amazing.
A company that creates a game.
Any client comes to us.
Comes to you and says, I need music, I need sound design,
Yep.
I need voiceover,
Yep.
I
We
need
send them to the
anything
right
audio.
departments. We connect them to whoever we need to. Chris Evans, Erica Mahalo, whoever is working, Patrick Ginn, sound supervisors all throughout the company. And then when they come to us for music, they'll have the music ask. We're able to source composers depending on whatever genre they're looking for, whatever mood. And depending on the project scope, it can be anything from small virtualized in the box electronic music to live scores with giant orchestras.
Amazing.
And we've recorded all over the world for amazing franchises. Like,
how long have you been doing this?
I've been part of Formosa Group for 2 years now, and
Congrats.
it's been a dream come true. I've been working under Savina Tiaramella, who's the executive head of the music department, and senior director, I believe, to get her title right. We've had a lot of growth recently because Streamland Media is our parent company, and we've just been expanding, and we have storefronts all over the globe.
Amazing.
So it's like, trying to remember everything.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And of course, she knows Steve. Because
I know Steve Lukather. Hi, Aunt Steve, and happy belated birthday.
Oh yeah,
and,
it was 4 or 5 days ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. I'm able to bring this like networking, these connections, these old school composers and session musicians, and bringing new talent into the mix. Like I was able to work with Nico Bolas recently, who's
Nico.
He's an excellent Dolby Atmos mixer.
Yeah.
It was very wonderful working with him. We've also worked with amazing composers like Alexander Desplat, Phil Boucher, Takeshi Furukawa. The list goes on and on.
With John Key, with Tom Hulkenberg?
I believe so, yeah. We were going to do a project with Tom Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
We were lining it up, but this year has been incredibly busy. So
yeah, after 2 years of stuttering, now
exactly. The stages are opening up, and so if you have a project, let us know so we can book the stage immediately.
Yeah. Amazing.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, thank you ever so much. I really appreciate this.
It's a pleasure.
Incredible.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. Oh.
We'll have links to Formosa underneath down here, so check it out. So with Aaron McLaren, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Now you're with Epic Games, and you are one of the main sponsors here,
yes,
apparently.
Epic is sponsoring GameSound Con at a Epic Platinum level, and that means that we get 2 full days of talks in the Mediterranean room. We've got about 12 talks over a huge variety of topics. Like
we're going to go and check that out in a minute because you've got a full Atmos rig in there.
Yes, we got a whole Atmos rig because we've partnered with Dolby, who's right over here next to us.
Great.
And we're giving talks about music production. There's a talk going on right now about generating 12 hours of procedurally generated music in Fortnite. That's going on right now.
Fantastic.
We're recording everything, and we'll be making all of our talks available probably sometime in December.
Now, I've been preaching Atmos for quite a few years. I mean, I was in Capitol maybe 5 or 6 years ago, working in one room, And Al Schmidt and Steve Genuit were in the other room mixing some of the first stuff. They were doing Beach Boys. They were just about to do the Miles Davis stuff. They even had like, I think it was like LL Cool J with an orchestra and all this crazy stuff. And I was blown away. But then, of course, it all came home to me because I have a 15-year-old son. And a few years ago, I bought him a headset, and before you know it, he's hearing everything in binaural.
100%, yeah.
And, you know, I just keep telling people, get into it, because it's not the future, it's the present. It's not going anywhere. The kid is growing up, listening to full-blown immersive.
So Unreal Engine is a game engine powering thousands of video games. One of the exciting things that's being demoed right here by Chris Murphy, who is our evangelist, our Epic evangelist. He's out there traveling the world. He's from Australia, and he's telling the story of Epic Games and UE, Unreal Engine. And here he's demonstrating MetaSounds, which is our new tool for generating procedural audio, announced in UE 5.0. 5.1 is coming out very soon. You can check it out in preview. This showcases some of the exciting features that we've been adding, like real-time analysis, real-time feedback on your nodes and your connections. In a nutshell, MetaSounds gives you the power of graphical shaders in the audio domain. So it's essentially like next-level audio technology that graphics and visual artists have been able to take advantage of in video games for decades now. With Unreal Engine for free, you'd be able to use MetaSounds, which we are very excited about and think is the future of game audio.
Incredible.
So this gives you kind of the power of modular synthesis, real-time procedural audio generation, synthesis, filters, total control of your DSP and your graph. So you can build your own audio effects, your own instruments, and control all of it dynamically from the video game engine. So if you're working with sound design or game designers or artists, you can have the sound designers and the composers working with artists directly without any programmers in the middle. So we're really excited. It's a very powerful feature. Check it out. There's tons of tutorials online. That's the gist. That's why we're here.
No, it's great. It's great. And we were talking to Dolby, and they were saying the connectivity is almost instant.
Yes, that's right.
Which is incredible.
Sample project, actually, we can talk about this. Maybe you've already looked at it.
We have, but it's tied together.
Yeah. So this project that they're demonstrating here is called Lyra, Lyra. It's Unreal Engine's sample project that we've given for free for developers to sort of see all the different features working together in a realistic kind of environment. It's a shooter game. It has all the animation, all the events, everything that's going on for a real video game. And all of the source that was used to create it, all of the content creation, all of the scripts, all the meta sounds that was used to make that are available to check this out for free. It's Lyra. And so Dolby Atmos was able to work with us, and their plugin is seamlessly integrated into the Lyra experience. All you got to do is enable the Dolby Atmos plugin, and all of the audio that was written without Atmos just suddenly works for Atmos. It's as easy as just enabling the plugin. So we had a 3D audio, our own 3D audio, but of course it's not Atmos. And then with the Atmos plugin, all of it just works and feeds through the object-based audio.
Eric demoed it.
Yeah.
Because he's the gamer here of the two of us.
Sounds good, right?
Sounds great.
Yep. Shots going past him, ricocheting. Yeah.
That particular project also features some other really exciting stuff. We contracted with Disaster Piece, Rich Reland, who is a well-known composer in video games, kind of in the indie space. You might have heard of Hyperlight Drifter or Fez. These are well-known games for audio. They won awards. Also, Mini Metro is one of my favorite things that he's done. He sort of in this sort of procedural world. He pinged me one day. He's like, "Hey, Aaron, I really want to do a project with Epic. I want to learn meta sounds. Like, you got anything coming up?" And I was like, "Oh, we got this sample project coming up. Why don't you come out and work with us?" And we managed to get him going. And the music in this project is all procedurally generated using meta sounds, all synthesis, reactive to the gameplay. So based on what's happening in the game, the music fundamentally is affected.
Amazing.
And it's a really exciting thing, totally available to check out. And it's kind of exciting to have somebody like Rich Reland or Disaster Piece, well-known composer, all of his work is out there to check out. We also contracted with a Gustav Ratzmann, who is a technical sound designer from DICE. on the Battlefield games. I don't know, another well-known video game franchise.
Are you a fan? He's nodding. He's nodding.
Yeah.
Eric knows it.
So they've won lots of audio awards, and Gustav is working with a company called Sweet Justice. They're kind of sort of contracting services. I highly recommend Sweet Justice out there if you are looking for really amazing sound designers. They're a great company to work with. They are deeply integrated with our team, and they also contract with Fortnite, so they know our tech really well. Anyways, Gustav came and did the actual weapon sound design, and he's one of the speakers talking today. Also, by the way, Rich Vreeland from Disaster Piece is also talking at GameSound Con. So they're both here if you want to track them down and talk with them. They're basically giving talks on different experiences they had with our tech. Now, what's important about Gustav is he's probably one of the best gun sound design people in the world, working on the gun audio for Battlefield. All of that you can dissect in Lyra and see how he did it. And like I said, he's giving a talk on that at GameSound Con.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have links. We'll get as many links as we can from you to put below.
Yeah. And again, all the talks that we're doing here are being recorded. We've got Brian Schmidt, organizer of GameSound, has agreed to let us take all of the materials we're generating here, and Epic will redistribute them later. We're going to give them to our video team to cut up and edit and make sure they all sound good. And then estimated hopefully around December. Probably it'll take November. Epic has just done Unreal Fest last week in New Orleans. So that was a much bigger conference across all disciplines. And so our Epic team is busy getting all those videos. So we're going to get it after that. So stay tuned.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
I can talk forever.
No, this is great. We thought, why don't we talk to people that actually work as sound designers on games? So we got Tim and Zach. Who do you both work for? You work for different companies, don't you?
Yeah, I'm at Singularity 6 right now, which is a startup. We're based out of LA. We're working on a community sim game called Palea. But before that, I was at Obsidian for 8 years, starting on South Park Stick of Truth.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. And Tim, what are you doing?
I work at Lightspeed LA, which is actually in Orange County, California, and we're a Tencent studio. I'm not allowed to talk anything about the game yet.
Okay.
But it's a big AAA title, and we're doing awesome stuff.
Excellent, excellent. So I was just telling you off camera, I have only had one experience doing sound design on games, and that was probably close to 20 years ago. And I remember it was a helicopter game, which I think was called Comanche or something like that. And I remember the whole challenge was to still make it sound like a gunshot, for instance, but to get it down as small as possible because there was such a limited space in those days for sound design.
Right.
I assume now, everything 20 years later is so much better and you've got more storage space, but is that still part of the job?
Yeah, I mean, you still hit the limits, you know what I mean? I think it'll always be that way, right? You're always going to try to crunch in as much as you can possibly get on the disk and load into memory at one time. So we still are dealing with those same problems. It's just, at a higher capacity now.
Yeah, I remember on the gunshots, we just basically had to get rid of all the ambience. So you couldn't have like the sound, it was just like, it wasn't like that really natural ambience that you'd want to hear.
Right, exactly.
I presume now that's not, as you say, as big of an issue. But sound design is so much more fun now, and you can do so much better stuff. I mean...
Lots of plugins.
Lots of plugins. Do you have any favorites?
I mean, in terms of creative stuff, I'd say just the Sound Toys bundle is awesome.
Okay. Been around for a while.
But Serum, when you're talking about synthesizers.
FabFilter is my workhorse go-to usually, and they...
Which one, sorry?
FabFilter.
Oh, FabFilter, just for EQs and compressors and stuff?
Well, I mean, even Saturn and stuff like that, and Timeless, they got some pretty good generative stuff as well, other than just their, filters and EQ.
So you're using similar stuff to us, to the guys just in good old rock and roll?
100%.
Yeah?
Yep.
No clever. Did you see, we were at AES last week and we saw Sound Particles. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah, I've used Sound Particles, yeah.
You've been using it?
I haven't in a while, but I did briefly, which it's kind of crazy because it's all generative grain synthesis, right?
Yeah.
So you can be like, I want a bee sound, and you get 10 different samples of bees, and then you can spawn in 1,000.
Yeah.
It'll actually sound like a swarm of bees from these 10 little samples.
Great.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I really love the guys that were demoing it. They were just nutty and I was just this is what I like. What about you? Do you have any?
I actually have not used Sound Particles before. I've definitely seen the demos and it looks awesome. But me personally, I'm a technical sound designer, so I have a lot more fun in the game engine, kind of making the tools / systems that makes the audio play more so than even making the sounds themselves. I do both, but I much more prefer like the engine problem solving type things.
That sounds fun. Did you start off doing more of the mixing, the editing, and then develop into that? How did you get into it?
I started as a studio engineer at Trackstar Studios down in San Diego.
Nice.
So that was like I was in games doing quality assurance. I wanted to get into audio. I went and did studio engineering, and then came back.
That's how it goes.
Came back and did the
Wait, how did you start?
I went to the Conservatory of Recording Arts in Arizona, and I originally wanted to be in a music studio, and then they had a game course there. And after I took the game course, I was kind of like, I love games and I love audio. I could marry these two together.
Great.
So I did sound design for 8 years at Obsidian, and then now for the last year and a half, I've been solely doing tech, like Tim, building out audio systems.
Nice.
And, making the stuff run, and like you said, cramming down or getting us within the memory budget and all the optimizations that go along with that.
It sounds fun. I mean, it seems to be like the dream job because gaming is not going anywhere. As the music industry seems to feel like it's shrinking, the gaming industry is just exploding.
Yeah, I think COVID helped with that too. Everyone's inside wanting to play games more, and
Yeah, it's one thing where it's interesting as someone who was. When I think about being a kid, it was like the thing I was interested in, right? Is I was just playing games nonstop, and now to see kind of like where it's gone. And there's days where I'm like, are we like, when do we start hitting a wall of like diminishing returns in terms of growth, right? But everything you see, it's just growing.
Although I have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, and their favorite games are Roblox and Minecraft, stuff that looks like the games I played when I was a kid. I'm like looking at this going, like the most ridiculous looking, remedial looking features.
Right.
But they love it. They absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about those games, right, is you can like build your own stuff within it. Like Roblox, you can script up your own game, so kids can build whatever they want to play, whatever they deem fun, which I think is kind of like going back to when you were a kid before you even had games, right? And you're like using your imagination and playing outside with your friends and making up your own games. And now they're doing that in like the digital space, which it's the same curiosity, just different avenue, I guess.
So have you found the show? We just got here a few minutes ago. We got a little bit late, so. And look, talking to the sound particles, they're over there.
Yeah, right there, exactly. No, I mean, the show's cool. This is actually my first time here. I've known about GameSound Con for years, but either just been too busy with work or, just not able to make it out. And first time, and like, we've talked on Zoom before, but never in person.
First time
So we met in person, we're already talking a lot of shop, and same thing with a bunch of people here. It's just kind of, it's kind of like going to NAMM, right? You go to NAMM and you meet, and you're just like, oh, here's my people. You know what I'm saying? So the exhibitions and the meetings, I'm sure we'll get some good learning, but for the most part, I'm just enjoying talking to people right now.
I'd say the same. It's like with game audio, it's such a niche community, and you're always trying to tell people about what you do, and you're like talking about it, and you can just see their eyes kind of glaze over. So it's nice to actually be in a room full of people that actually care about what you're talking about, and share the same issues and might have solutions to those issues that you didn't think about, and that to me is the coolest part.
Absolutely. I mean, gaming is such a visual experience that the audio is almost taken for granted.
It's half the experience, right?
Yeah. So how are you guys coping? We went over to Dolby. Obviously, immersive is not going anywhere. I keep telling people it's not going anywhere. People argue with me, no, it's the same as quad. It's like, no, it's not. It's like my son's 15. He's had a virtual headset since they came out the last 3-4 years or whatever. So he's used to sound following him and being behind him and wherever the visual is, the sound's coming from. But as audio guys, was that a bit of a challenge to try and integrate that in? Because it's obviously going to be a lot more space required for that.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a challenge. A lot of like game engines in our audio, like middleware, handles a lot of that stuff kind of automatically, right? Because the game knows where things are 3D positioned, and then it knows where to place it in the speaker array, right?
Right.
So I think the more challenging part would be more like linear stuff, like a cutscene or something like that, where you're specifically tailoring things to go through the Atmos speakers and stuff like that. That's where the real challenge is. So thankfully for us, it sounds really cool, kind of out of the box. Right. You got to tweak it. You got to set it up, but it's not as hard as actually sitting there and panning things around all the time.
So they associate an image with the sound, and so they're sort of done for you.
Right, just because the engine knows where something is positioned.
Okay. Great.
So it just says, oh, it's above you, go ahead and put it up in the top channels.
Nice.
Yeah, the hard part in terms of like when it comes to spatialization, like you said, you put an object on sound, it moves around. All that kind of is done by the engine. But the kind of more interesting stuff that you really get to play with in game audio is more like you're building like that fall off distance. Where in linear media, music, you draw a curve and it goes down in volume. But now you need to actually, we actually have to draw attenuation curves. We're like, at 3,000 units, you're going to start dropping in volume, and we tell it like how much. So it's kind of,
how far away can you hear that thing? You're defining that. What happens as you get farther away? Maybe it starts to get a little bit of a low pass.
Sure.
So, or is it behind a wall? We have to determine where those walls are to say, hey, there's an obstruction between the listener and the.
So there's no kind of algorithm where you say every X number of feet that low pass is moving like this. There's no.
I mean, you define that curve. So you say you can hear it from 3,000 units away, and then over a linear curve, it'll start to. I mean, you can make that curve however you want, however crazy you want.
Right.
Typically, it'll be like linear or logarithmic curve, right?
Right.
But yeah, for like a lot of the geometry and stuff, we do have to define like this is a wall. It's concrete. It might occlude the sound 50%. Versus. A cardboard box would be 10% or something like
sure.
that. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of defining that versus linear media. You're kind of just looking at it and making judgment calls. This is all like kind of procedural and dynamic.
Does anybody make a plugin where you can replicate the space? So wherever you sort of like place it. I know that's just a generic reverb, but a true, you know what I mean, where you can design your space and say, I'm in whatever, we're in the Biltmore Hotel, and that gunshot's coming from here, so.
You want to?
I mean, yeah, we're really like we're actively talking about like Wise, the middleware right there, which both of our studios use.
Yeah.
They've got their spatial and their reflect systems, which the reflect is really a lot of what you're talking about, where you're like, sound is over there, we get different reverberations.
Yeah.
This is what we were talking about as you walked up. Actually.
Sure.
Yeah.
It would seem like the biggest challenge for what you guys do.
And it definitely is, and it's something that is constantly growing. It's constantly like I would say, it hasn't been perfected, and I'm biased because I use Wise and Audio Kinetic, but like I like what they do, and it's just kind of a thing of like, how much can we grow it, and how much can we as the designers kind of find tools that help make that system better, and then hopefully influence the next series of like, how do we make this better and better?
Looks like a lot of integration because you've got the visual guys. They've got to tell you what all of their reflective services would be made of.
Right. Yep.
There's a lot of thinking to go in it because obviously grass is going to be completely different if you're outside.
Totally.
Than carpet and glass and chandeliers and everything else.
And that's tough. It's a lot to take into consideration. And another thing is it's expensive for the computer, right? To have to calculate all that stuff. How far away are you from that surface versus that surface? How much is reflecting back from the right and left? Or now, like we're talking about Atmos, from the rears, from your ceiling speakers, stuff like that. It's like
it's kind of cool.
There's so much moving around, and you kind of some of it is out of your hands, like we're saying. It's kind of generative, and it kind of happens at the moment you're playing, and you kind of just have to tune it and have it all fall into place.
But once that comes together, it's going to be insane because it's already with a lot of stuff that my son plays. When I'm in there, it's amazing how much has come. Although obviously the amount of information is still a bit too much. I feel like I haven't quite. You can still play a two-dimensional game, and it's so much more realistic than it is in a virtual world.
Right.
But we all know it's just space and speed. Once space is not a problem and speed is not a problem, all of this stuff is available.
Right.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. Working in immersive, being in immersive, like how difficult it must be to calculate and figure that stuff out.
It's a lot of upfront work when things don't sound good. Like kind of like with music, you get a good musician in, you get some recording done, we can start getting the beat down real good. With games, it can be a lot of time up front where you've got your base set of sounds in, and then you're sitting there clocking numbers and curves and all these kind of like pre-mixed settings to where you finally get like, okay, we're at a first pass level.
Yeah. That first bit is pretty painful. You're like, do we even have a game here, right? And it's slow. It's a long time before you start loading into the game and you start hearing all the stuff come together. Right. You're like, okay, I'm getting footsteps. I'm getting the birds and the trees that are moving. I'm getting the wind. I'm getting gunshots in the distance and all that kind of stuff, all kind of coming together.
I know Acoustica, which is CPU heavy to say the least, do have rooms that they've modeled unbelievably accurately, and you can place. I think that I was messing with one a couple of years ago where you're in a concert hall and you can literally place the musicians around, and it is perfect. You can visually see it, but it's so CPU heavy.
Once that's like not even a barrier anymore. Computers of the future, right? And we can actually have that in the game at runtime and have it changing constantly.
Move into a different room, a whole different acoustic.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but I wonder, like with plugins, where they're going in and modeling spaces for reverbs, modeling, old pieces of equipment, all this stuff, whether that's the future of game design, whether they start going in to rooms like this and design this game and go in here into this room and model everything about it.
I mean, they had that for 3D, right? Like you can do a 3D scan of the room and load it up into some 3D software, right? And then polish it up and have it be almost identical, right? And I mean, we can kind of do the same with audio with like IRs and stuff like that.
Yeah, we've got the convolution reverbs, and so while we might not have as much like the early reflections and the actual positionality, we're still able, just like any other plugin in Pro Tools, like we can go and get IRs and plug them into Audio Kinetic, and
I just feel like
room sound like a real room.
That could be the future of some really amazing games. Like rent out the Empire State Building for a week and design a game around the Empire State Building, going into all the rooms, getting all of the
and perfectly modeled,
perfectly modeled. That'd be awesome.
Yes. I mean, there are some things that are kind of like that already. Not full-fledged games, but like putting on a VR headset and walking within the space and making noise in there and hearing the space that's using IRs, and they actually will have the reflections.
Sure, go to the Ducal Palace in Venice or something like that and model it for people that aren't ever going to be able to travel.
Yeah, that's a really cool consideration. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. You get everything right, get all the impulse responses, get all the visual aspects right, and then just feel like you're there.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's fun.
Well, we're not there yet, but we're getting there.
I like the future.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you ever so much, Zach.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Nice
I appreciate it.
Yep.
We're going to keep walking around.
Welcome. Hello. How's everybody's GameSound Con? All right, so my name is Brian.
I'm also Brian. I'm Brian Trifon.
And we are collectively known as Finishing Move. In case you don't know who we are video game composers. We've been fortunate to work on a lot of really cool projects, both big and small. You can see some of those things here. We also do a lot of sound design and music for trailers. So this is just a little bit of some pictures of stuff we worked on. And what we are here today to talk about. The name of the talk is called Found Sounds, Embracing Serendipity in Your Craft and Career. And this is kind of, I'm sure anybody that's played any sort of games in the last 30 years, maybe what's it, like 40 years now? An example of classic wisdom from Zelda, of course. And how does that relate to this talk? So I think everybody's heard the kind of classic composer backstory of, I was 6 years old and my dad took me to see Star Wars, and at that moment I knew I wanted to be exactly like John Williams and be a composer. And so this is the anti-story to that. We're going to tell it in two parts. And so sort of what this talk is about is the idea that a career can kind of present more like an open world RPG than sort of a linear side scroller. Not everybody's career, but careers, and specifically our career. And the idea is the experiences and sort of the learned lessons are like inventory and skill triads that prepare you for opportunities you maybe have yet to encounter. Or maybe even opportunities that you may have failed to capture sort of in earlier attempts. And so the idea is, our story, as it relates to sort of embracing the serendipity, really is that we never set out to be video game composers. We were well into our professional careers, and we probably didn't even know that video game composing was a thing. I mean, we probably did, but it was kind of like we were approaching other opportunities and going to sort of different pathways and tugging at threads and kind of figuring out and kind of learning things along the way. And really, we're going to tell you a little bit of a story, kind of how we started and sort of how we kind of found our way here to GameSound Con, doing the keynote, which is really wild for us. And the lessons that we've learned along the way, whether they were while we were sort of approaching this life as video game composers, or as video game composers, sort of these little sort of skill tree ads that we were able to sort of pick up along the way, they're very much evergreen in our career. So it's going to start with a little bit of history. And the idea of the history is not to sort of like toot our own horn or anything. In fact, there's some tragedies in there that we'll talk about. It's more to then provide context for part two, so we can kind of point back to sort of these evergreen lessons that we learned along the way. A quote from Drake there that relates very much. And by the way, I was like doing this sort of preparing for this keynote, and I said, oh, I need a really cool quote. And this is like, I was like, oh, Drake, okay, well. And it actually makes sense, right? Sometimes it's the journey that teaches you a lot about your destination. And that's kind of like a very appropriate quote for what we're going to talk about tonight.
All right, I'm going to talk about how it started, first with myself, and then Brian will talk about him, and then we'll talk about our forces combining. So one thing that this is just true in life in general is like you have an idea of how things are, and then there's reality. You really don't know what reality is like until you just like get your hands dirty and you start doing stuff. And the further away that the reality is from your expectations, like, the more disappointing or difficult it is. So, life is filled with a lot of pivots, and our careers were both just on our own and then as we combined together. So I'm going to start at the beginning. So the first thing is the first dream that I had was like, okay, I'm going to be a heavy metal guitar shred hero. And this is because when I was 10 years old, I had a buddy named Jonathan Price. We were in his mom's minivan, and Metallica's Enter Sandman came on. And I heard the chug guitars, and I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. And I was pretty serious about it. Like, I begged my parents, they got me a guitar, like I rented a guitar, I started taking lessons. And then sort of, as I was digging to that, like within a year, so like when I was 11, I started to explore, some of the other guitar heroes. Of course, over here on the left, there's Kirk Hammett, he's in Metallica. But then I wanted to explore, there's the neoclassical shred guy, Yngwie J. Malmsteen, not to be confused with the other Yngwie Malmsteens out there. But he sort of pioneered this, this really technical neoclassical shred thing, and I loved it. And the other person that was really influential at this early point in my life was Steve Vai. And I had this exact poster on my wall, and I practiced really hard. So I took it seriously, and all through, this is high school, I guess, I shredded away, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Like, I'm gonna try to be a guitar shred hero. And so I took that goal all the way to college. So I applied to USC's studio guitar program, and I was really fortunate. I got in, and it's like a good program, and I was like, wow, okay, this is like, I'm on my way here. And so when I was at USC, I got there and I heard my classmates, and I realized, like, damn, these people are really good. Like, these young men and women, like, are really, really good. And in the back of my mind, I kind of realized that, like, maybe I might never be as good as how some of them are now, as like 18 and 19-year-old kids. But at that time, like with ego and everything, I wasn't able to fully recognize that. So it wasn't until about 2 years later I had another good opportunity. I interned at the Fox scoring stage, at the Newman scoring stage where they record the orchestra. And like, it was chill. Like I just was making coffee, answering their phone in the back. And this is like in 2002 or 3. But at that time, they were doing all these beautiful orchestral sessions. They were recording Seabiscuit, they were doing Matrix Revolutions. But the thing that really changed everything, that sort of put the nail in the coffin to that Guitar Hero dream that I realized, was starting to fade, was that Thomas Newman did a session there, and he had a guitar player, this guy George Deering, and they just put the music in front of him. He'd read it, interpret it perfectly, double it, move on to the next thing. And I remember during one of the breaks, like looking at the music and thinking, man, this is really hard. Like I'd have to go and really practice this, and I'm just never going to be able to compete. So that was the first pivot where I had this expectation and this dream, and reality was like not lining up with it. So it's like, okay, well, I can change what I'm doing a little bit, set out new expectation, new reality. And so with that, I was always interested in, music production, electronic music, and, I was, really liked being in the studio at Fox, and so I got an internship with this electronic music producer named BT. And so I worked in his studio and as an intern, and it was a good experience. I learned a lot of different things, and at that time he was sort of at a peak of his career. He was working on pop music, like he was producing NSYNC and working on films and some games like Tiger Woods 2005. So, it was a lot of different things I was exposed to, and I was kind of like, oh, like maybe this Hollywood composer life, as an assistant would be cool. And so, I did get hired on after I graduated and started writing additional music for all of his projects, for the movies and his albums. I even got to sort of live my guitar fantasy because, I toured with him, we played at the Hollywood Bowl, it was like lots of stuff. But I was really, really miserable doing it. I just didn't like it, and I think the hardest part was acknowledging that, okay, this is what I set out to do. I'm kind of doing it, and I hate this. So that was sort of an important moment and sort of the next pivot where I was like, okay. And so I quit, which was very difficult to do because, it's like, it was not an amicable split. He was not happy about it, and I didn't really have anything. And I was like, okay, I've just thrown away all my opportunities, everything in my career, and what am I going to do? So I moved back to my mom's house, into her basement, and I started another project with my brother. It's called Triphonic. It's just my last name with an IC at the end. And it was like an electronic music thing, and we worked on an album, and actually at the end of it, I was like, damn, this is good. This is the first thing I ever thought that I'd worked on that was pretty good. And there's one track in particular, it's called Parks on Fire, that I was like, this is great. So I sent it out to all the labels, everything I could. Never heard anything back from anybody. And so, self-released it. And some people liked it, and later it opened up a lot of doors. But at that time, it was kind of like, all right, this is a failure. I gotta figure out something else in my life. So that was sort of the beginning phase of my career. And so I think now I'm gonna talk about your beginnings.
Pivots are a big theme of this talk. So, how did it start for me? Actually, very, very different than Triphon here. So, I did start out playing music as a kid in family bands and things like that. My dad owns a music store in a very small town about 100 miles northeast of here called Tehachapi, and I worked there through high school. So tons of exposure to music. I played guitar, played in bands, wrote songs, even got into a little bit of sort of 90s era computer music production. Then my parents were like, well, you got to go to college. And you got to go to college for something practical. And at the time, I was like, fine, I agree with this. I was a very practical person. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go studied computer engineering because I was really into computers. And first pivot right there is like, first semester and I was like, oh, yep, I'm not going to be a computer engineer. It was just like way too much math, it was just like the reality of like messing around on my computer, playing games, things like that. And then like, oh, actually I have to do this and like study this. So instant pivot as soon as I hit college, and I switched to business and economics, which was a little it was a little more liberal arts focused, I guess you'd say, not as hard science. I didn't have to do the hard math. I didn't have to do any of that. So that was cool. And I did that. I pursued that very seriously. Like I ended up graduating with a 4.0, top of my class, everything like that. I did a bunch of accounting courses because I was preparing to be a CPA. That was going to be my big career. No offense to any CPAs out there. I love our CPA. He does so much for us. But I had done an internship with one of the, at the time it was Big Four, so it was kind of like Arthur Anderson had their whole like Enron moment, and it went from 5 to 4, and I did an internship with one of the big accounting firms in San Jose. And this was sort of like the summer of my third year, so sort of the year before I would graduate. And talk about like panic attack central. So I did this internship, and they throw you right into the deep end where you're actually doing audits of huge publicly traded corporations. It's just like, fine, get in there, kid, here you go. And oh man, just terrible. Talk about sort of reality expectations, just like colliding in the worst crash ever. And I did that internship, and at the same time, my parents, they were trying to, my brother, he's 2 years younger than me. He wasn't in college at the time. He kind of wasn't doing anything after high school. And so my parents were just like, how do we motivate this kid, like to go do something? And they got him some pamphlets. I think it was for a Full Sail in Florida, to like they had like sort of like recording, engineering, and live sound stuff. And I remember seeing these pamphlets was during sort of like a break, like winter break. And I remember seeing these pamphlets, and I'm like, that's no fair. Like, he gets, like, this looks rad. Like, he gets to go to, like, he's doing nothing, and you're going to pay for him to, like, go, like, learn how to record bands. Like, I want to record bands. Like, I want to do all this. And at that time, I decided, okay, not going to do accounting. I called the accounting firms that I'm not going to take the job offer. I graduated early. I did not go to Full Scale because I already spent all my money on getting a business degree. And I went to go work at a recording studio for free. I had no plan. There was no, like, how am I going to live? How am I going to make money? And my parents were not supporting me. This was not like something where it's like, oh yeah, go off and we'll pay your rent and while you sort of explore this new thing. They were supportive in that I didn't want to do accounting, but at the same time, it was the end of that support was like, okay, well, you got to do something, and we're not going to pay for you to do it. So I went and I interned at a music studio, and I quickly made myself useful. We'll talk about that later, sort of why that's a pro tip. I was able to sort of use some of my computer stuff, my business stuff, to kind of quickly be useful to the owner of the recording studio. Even though I was sort of very early in my music production career, I didn't know a lot about engineering other than just self-taught stuff. This was before YouTube, so everything I knew was just like basically messing around, recording my own bands and things like that. But I was good enough at kind of doing IT stuff for him that he let me stick around and gave me keys to the place, and so I had access to it really anytime I wanted to, and I started getting paid too to do this work. And the studio was also a school. They taught Pro Tools, and it was kind of a weird shift, a weird time for this school. So when we're talking about serendipity, one of the owners kind of just was tired of, and this I didn't realize this until way later. And there's a little picture of me in a music video. performing this. Talk about just like a wild pivot. But that's just exactly that. It was like an opportunity to actually like write music, and that was really something that like that's what I really wanted to do. I actually want to like write music and produce music. You know, the engineering, you know, was kind of, you know, not working out, and so I did this for a while, and it was great. But the money was like, man, like I'm really going to be able to make a living at doing this. Like it's really hard to kind of like put together gigs, and it's kind of, it was like making $50, making $100 a day, you know, like they're really like, you know, like not really paying rent in the Bay Area kind of thing. And, you know, kind of, I was still teaching, so that helped a lot. And, you know, that kind of brings us to the next phase of where we come together. And the school that I was teaching at lost one of their teachers. And I was in charge of, basically, because I was the head instructor at that point. It's kind of wild. I was in the late 20s, like, oh, now I'm the head instructor, I guess, because I was the one who was there the longest. And we need a new teacher, and they said, hey, you got to find a new teacher. And we had a mutual friend named Quinn, who I had been working on a bunch of this $50, $100 a day kind of music stuff with, producing records. And he said, hey, you know, like, talk to Brian. He just moved back from LA. He's done a bunch of big stuff. And I was like, oh man, okay, well, like, this guy's a slam dunk. I can advertise this guy all day. He's big league. He's doing films. He's doing everything. And I brought him in to work at school. He did not know how to use Pro Tools, but I was like, don't worry about that. I'll teach you. I'll teach you how to use Pro Tools. And yeah, he started teaching, and that's when we met, and that's really when we like created this bond. And he'll take it over there and talk a little bit more about that.
So yeah, I started teaching Pro Tools like after just learning it from him. But I was, just to be clear, I was teaching like the Pro Tools introduction courses, so it was not, you know, advanced things. But, you know, I really enjoyed the teaching process. And so from that, I actually, you know, like it wasn't quite enough work from just Brian. I started teaching music synthesis classes at another school in San Francisco. And that was really great because like I connected with a lot of students, and later when we had actually formed our team and we needed to expand and work with people, like a lot of the people that we ended up working with and that are part of our team now were students of mine. One thing that was good that also was starting to happen was that the triphonic stuff, so my electronic music, was like getting a little bit of buzz going. And so there were some advertising agencies that reached out. They wanted me to rework some of the tracks for things, and I made some relationships with commercial music houses. And so then we started getting asked to do, you know, commercials. So I started writing music for commercials, and I quickly realized that, like, okay, this is great. Like, finally getting paid, like, can make a living. But like, you know, you do like 20 revisions on a mattress jingle, and it's tough. And like, you know, I was kind of slow because I'm coming from the background of like, you know, like high concept musical sound design, and like, you know, just spending a lot of time on stuff that didn't really need it. And so I hired Brian to help me with a lot of stuff because I knew that he was really fast, he could write fast, he could mix. And so we started just doing a lot of jingles together. And that was actually like a really good thing, but we just got tired of like the people in advertising, and this is not, you know, it might have just been our experience of the people we were working with, but it was not pleasant. Were not very nice to us, and you know, we're both kind of like, all right, I hope there's other things we can do. So pivot. What's that?
New pivot.
Yeah, new pivots. Yeah. So fortunately, around 2010 or so, my triphonic project started to kind of kick off in like a good way. I think it was because like at that point, dubstep hit America, and even though that's not at all what I was doing, there's like shared some common ancestors, and so like there was more opportunities from that. There was a at some game companies. There was a Wii game called Calling by Hudson Soft. And so they reached out to me. They're like, "Oh, we love Triphonic. Like, can you do the theme for this and the end credit music?" And I was like, "Yeah, awesome." And it's like you use the Wiimote as a flashlight. So I did that and started to get calls from other composers and other people doing stuff for both film but also video games. And so one of the things that was good early on was I just started doing session work for other composers. And I got to give, a shout out to Jesper Kidd. He hired me for Assassin's Creed 2 to just do a bunch of acoustic guitars. And he wanted me to just do also lots of weird stuff. But doing that, I saw like, oh, this music is like done vertically in layers and sort of got the format of how the cues work. So I started doing a lot of kind of subcontracting, session work on guitar and, synths and stuff like that. And then there was one project where I got subcontracted, and it was for a good game and from a really good composer that's, a friend of mine. But where in their music document, it referenced Triphonic, Parks on Fire. And I had been hired by him to like recreate that sound for this game. And I'm like, this game company, they don't even know who I am. And I realized I'm like, okay, I think I'm doing my career wrong. And I want to say that the composer that hired me, I don't blame him. That's the smart move to do. That's exactly what I would have done. It's like you find out, go to the source of someone who does something, you hire them to do it. So, so it was kind of like, oh man, this video game stuff I'm doing wrong. And, we both sort of realized that, we had good potential as a team. So, but I knew that I was like, okay, I'm tired of this subcontracting stuff. We've got to stop. So then we kind of pivoted into pop music, and Brian is going to talk about that direction.
Yeah, I'm going to be real brief on this. So basically at this point, we were working together quite a bit on the ad stuff. And again, sort of like making pretty good money, but sort of like, we want a little bit more. We want a little bit more creative freedom. And so some opportunities with actually a guy that Brian went to school with, USC, was doing big pop records here in LA, and he needed people. He was a songwriter, and he's like, he knew our stuff, and said, "Do you guys want to like come down and work on my team? Producing actual records, And these were cutting big records. So at the time, it was like the Beyonce's, Britney Spears, like that kind of thing. That era of pop music writing, and really, we don't have to get huge into that. There were pluses about that. Really, sort of honed our skills in music writing. The minuses were that again, it went back to like, oh wow, not making any money. And so the video game and the pop stuff, we were kind of looking at as like these are really cool opportunities. Like I felt like we found. This is creatively satisfying because the pop music was very creatively satisfying. The games were super stimulating and satisfying. And we both sort of decided okay, we're a team now. We're going to go in the direction of whichever one pops, like whichever one kind of takes us in the direction we're looking for. We don't know what that's going to be. And, big surprise, it wasn't the pop. It wasn't the pop music. And, you take this one, right?
Yeah. So we sort of been working as a team now, and we decide, okay, we're ending the subcontracting. We're not going to do pop music. And so the first really good opportunity we had in games was for the Halo 1 anniversary, the 10-year anniversary. So I was teaching these synthesis classes at this school in San Francisco. And there was Paul Lipson worked there, and at that time he was a composer and head of sort of production arm. And so he was hired by Microsoft 343 to basically recreate the music from this, by Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore of Halo, and basically just transcribe it and re-record it, and he had assembled a team with Tom Salta and Lenny Moore, really great guys, and he's like, hey, do you want to do the synth stuff for this, because we need to to recreate that and sort of add a little bit of a modern spin. And I was like, yeah, of course. And he's like, yeah, and you'll get credit and everything. I was like, all right. So I started working on that, and that was going well, and Brian was helping with that. And then we recognized that there was a strange technical challenge going on, like because this was gonna this redo, or this anniversary was gonna use the same audio engine as the original. So there's no middleware, there's no like Wise or Fmod. It was just sort of like a very primitive baked in thing with just audio files. And so we looked at the original files, which we'd have to replace one for one, like every asset with the same name. And there'd be like an intro and a couple of loops and an outro. And I realized like in a DAW that you could change the order of these, and there was never like clicks and pops or anything. Like everything was like, the crossfades were baked in. I was thinking, man, like if we're recording orchestra and doing this synth stuff, like how are we gonna do these crossfades? So I sent it over to Brian, and together we kind of figured out like, okay, using this software that's called Keymap Pro, which was like for making, contact instruments and stuff, that you could bake in the crossfades. And not only that, you could do like layers of crossfades. So you could have multiple files that all kind of start the same, and you can transition from any one to any other without a click or a pop. And so we figured out how to do this like for basically all of the assets, music assets for the Halo anniversary. And that was kind of like the big like, okay, this is good. And then what was serendipitous at that time, Paul left and he went to Microsoft and he became an audio director there. And he approached us about like a big project, which we're going to talk about, that unfortunately got canceled. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, just to point out that the Halo 1 stuff was like total Mario warp whistle, like career. Like most people don't know, it's like, oh, the first game you can work on is a Halo game. It's like, okay. But we'll get to sort of like the later on in this talk, sort of the idea about being able to solve a very specific problem, sort of being kind of the only people sort of at hand that were able to solve a very specific problem that needed solving, and really got our foot in the door and really kind of gave us that Mario warp whistle kind of thing. And so after sort of realizing that we were competent people, we were asked to pitch on a big AAA property. It's a huge thing, and have live orchestral budget, everything like that. And it was awesome because it was like, oh, finally going to actually get to have our own voice. We're going to be able to write our own music. It's going to be amazing. And some cool pictures that we took when we formed our company. like you do, like everybody should do. So there's just a little sort of timeline here. And so we did Halo 1 anniversary, sort of programming, and we won the pitch on that, and we were going to be the composers on this big budget game. Like, dream come true. Like, oh my god, like we finally arrived. Like, we're here, it's our own thing. Halo was cool, but we were redoing Marty and Michael Salvatore's music, which is amazing music, super iconic, but we obviously wanted to write our own music and do that. And we did that, and that game got canceled. So, sort of right out the gate, sort of our first kind of like big win, kind of turned into a big failure. It was not our fault. The game wasn't canceled because of the composers, and it rarely is. That's not something that you don't usually cancel a huge AAA project because like, the composers are just not getting it. Cancel it. Everybody go. But we did a great job on that. There were pivots in this where they changed directions in the game, actually like completely changed musical styles, and we said, we're here for it, we'll do it. Like, we completely changed directions from one style to another. Thankfully, just from our advertising experience, having to just cover so many styles quickly, it was not a stretch for us to kind of do that pivot. It was like, sure, you want this? Okay. And so I think because of that, what we proved was that, okay, well, even though the game was canceled, these guys are legit. They can do a good job. And people remember that. The partners you're working with remember that, right? So the game is neither here nor there. And sort of what that led to is immediately when that game was canceled, they started making Halo 2 anniversary. And it's like, hey, you guys want to come back? And do you want to come back with a bigger role on this as you know, sort of co-composers and score supervisors? Are you supposed to talk about this, or am I talking about
this?
Yes,
you got it.
it's not right in there. Anyways, so that was an amazing opportunity because we had formed our corporation for this canceled game because we said, hey, we got to figure out how we're supposed to get paid. Like, we're just two guys. Like, are we going to like just split the checks in our bank account? And you know, I kind of used some of my business background and said, no, we should probably like get an accountant and form a corporation. And that was actually a really good idea because in order to be the master vendor score supervisor on the Halo 2 project, we needed to be like a legit business entity. It couldn't just be like a bozo off the street. We needed to be able to like have the right kind of insurance for liability and E&O and things like that. But we figured it all out. It was something that we were just like, oh, we need this insurance, we need, you know, this and that. Okay, we can do that. And so all of a sudden, we were sort of like, we went from composers to now we're composers and project managers and score supervisors. And so what that meant is like, we actually had to book all the sessions. This was done at Skywalker. So we had to actually interface with the scoring stage. We had to interface with the union for the orchestra. We had to negotiate and hire Steve Vai because he came back for Halo 2 anniversary, and so that was an interesting phone conversation with his management. They were very good negotiators, by the way.
Yeah, it was like I was weird because we were like negotiating with my childhood
hero. So it's like full circle. Like imagine that we're on the phone, and this is his childhood hero. He wasn't on the call; his agents were, and we're like. We were thinking it was going to be one price, you know, in our head, and they come in hot. Like, we're just like, oh my God, like, okay, for 1 day of work? And they're like, yeah, he doesn't show up for, that's the floor. I'm like, ugh.
But he was pro. He like killed it.
He's the coolest guy ever. Like, so that kind of like, because like we had a little bit of a bitter taste from that conversation, but as soon as he showed up, he was like, the sweetest dude in the world, and he hung out all night with us at Skywalker at the ranch. Like, so generous with his time. Such a cool opportunity. This is a children's choir. This is a fun fact about this, as it notes, to be the score supervisor and the signatory and the insurance holder. One or two of the kids passed out from nervousness. And the only thing that we could think of was like, is this something that the insurance is going to cover? Is this a $2 million policy issue, or is this a? And so this is like the crazy things that kind of came up in that. And again, this was like the first time we'd ever done that, but we did it, and it was actually very successful. This is us with Steve Vai, and we hired our friend Misha Mansour to do some guitar work, and Paul Lipson, who really, I mean, we have to credit Paul with like totally kickstarting our career, you know, because Paul was really there and believed in us from the beginning. You know, he recognized kind of those scraps of talent. Like, I know these guys, if I give them a ton of work, if I give them a ton of responsibility, they're not going to let me down. And we're so thankful for that, and thankfully we haven't let him down.
All right, so the next stage is like, okay, we've done 2 Halo anniversaries of Barty and Michael's music, and then we did our own thing, but it's canceled. So, you know, the next step was like, okay, how do we want to do things where we can express our own voice, and like Brian was talking about, also like we're finding our own voice as a business too, like we're trying to grow and make that all work. So fortunately, what happened was, the Halo 2 anniversary, the Master Chief Collection, all that went well. And so we had the opportunity to pitch on Halo Wars 2, which would be new. That was our own original music for that. And so we got hired for that, and that was really great. It was a way we could sort of express our own voice. We got to work with our good buddy, Gordy Hab. And another thing about that too is we actually got to record at Fox, the place where I was an intern. And this time we were the ones paying the bill and, responsible for the session. So that was, a really cool opportunity and nice moment. One of the things that was starting to happen at this point was like a compounding factor of like working on small projects or smaller things, building trust, doing a good job, and then sort of more opportunities coming. And so another example of that was we were working with Double Fine. We started on this very small project called Drop Chord, which was kind of like
2 tracks.
Yeah, 2 tracks. It was for like the leap motion control. And then they're like, the audio director, Brian Mann, he was like, oh, these guys are cool. Like he liked working with us. And so he's like, why don't you guys pitch on Massive Chalice, which is not EDM at all. It's more chamber stuff, very intimate, more serious music. And so we pitched on that, and we got that project, and that went well. And then when Brian Min, he went to Anki, which is a different company that makes like robotic AI toys, he hired us there to do the project. So things were starting to compound, like the opportunities that, seeds we had planted that were really, really slow to sprout were kind of compounding, and so that was kind of an important moment for us. And then, of course, along with that, there was also things that, didn't go quite as well.
Yeah, so we were still failing at this point on sort of the half of the things we did. So at this point, we decided, hey, let's do a solo album of music. We were focusing it we wanted to focus it on trailers because we had started kind of doing a little bit of trailer stuff, but we had no idea what we were doing. And so we made this album called Hype Scene. Really cool album, not formatted for trailers whatsoever, which we would learn after we completed the whole thing, instead of asking for help or something like that. Super cool as music, wouldn't work as trailers. And so that was a bit of a dejected moment. However, Chris Melroth at Microsoft, we sent him that it's not a score, it was just an album that we made for trailers. And he was like, bro, this is perfect for Crackdown 3. This is exactly we could just take some of these tracks and modify them and use them. And so we actually picked up a AAA video game from just kind of this mismanaged, uninformed trailer album project. So the idea is that you sort of never know where your kind of ideas are going to lead. You can like Brian was talking about, you can have compounding, which is very important, working through clients, getting bigger gigs. But, sometimes, and again, this is a reoccurring theme, right? So we did a little game called Fractured Lands. We really just did a menu piece of music for it. It was supposed to be a multiplayer game, Battle Royale style. Super cool people, some of our friends were making it. And the problem with the Battle Royale game is that if you don't get enough players loaded onto the server for matchmaking, nobody can play the game. So that's what happened. And then eventually, they couldn't get enough people loaded up to even play games. People were waiting hours to actually get in a match with 50 people. However, this is where GameSound Con ties in. We were doing a talk, and we just played some of the music that we had made for Fractured Lands. It was just like a track or two. And Grayson from Gearbox at the time was in the audience, and he heard that music, and he said, this would actually be really perfect for Borderlands. And he had known about our work back from when Brian was doing guitars for Jesper, and kind of connected the dots. And kind of remembered and went oh, that's a perfect fit, right? And we ended up working on a ton of Borderlands 3 content. We ended up doing the main SKU plus 3 DLCs. And that was all from literally this kind of tiny indie failed battle royale game, and then we did a talk where we played it, and someone liked that music. So again, sort of kind of like this turning lemons into lemonade. And it continues to this day. During the pandemic, we were working on something with Paul, again, for the Olympics, and everybody knows what happened to the Olympics, right? This was early 2022. We were working on this, or 2020, and of course, the Olympics got canceled. It was a VR thing, and nobody was putting shared masks on their face in the middle of the pandemic. However, it's sort of kind of like right around the same time, Paul was working with the newly formed SDS, and they were looking for a composer for Callisto Protocol. And Paul said, "Yo, like these guys, I've worked with them for years. Let them send you some stuff," because they were looking at some pretty big composers for this game, which is out actually in just about a month. And Paul said, "No. Let me send you some of my boys' stuff. You're gonna love it." And we actually won that gig, and we've been working on that for the last 3 years. And so we've been given the permission tonight to announce that yes, we are the composers of the Callisto Protocol, and that's here's some little. Photos of us playing a apprehension engine, which is a really cool custom handmade instrument from Canada that Mark Corvin invented. There aren't that many. All right, are you taking this next one?
Yeah. So that leads us to now, basically. And, first thing, with any keynote, obviously, we're like, hey, we did it, you can do it too. And that's a concept called survivorship bias. It's very flawed because you don't see all of the people that failed or all the failures we had, all the advantages that we have, all that stuff. But the things that we're going to try to impart to you are hopefully things that I believe are applicable to pretty much everybody, because it's just simple wisdom, things that we continue to try to live by. So, I think the main thing, especially if you're at the beginning of your career, is you want to start simple and then expand from there. And to really focus on being good at a singular thing, competitively good at that, just to get your foot in the door, and then you can expand your skill set from there. I think, we get a lot of demos from people and resumes, and, you look at it, it's really impressive, and you listen to it, and it's like, okay, here's my comedy music, here's my action music, here's my horror music, here's my orchestral suite, and, none of it's bad, but none of it's where you're like, wow, that's really, that is amazing. And so I think you're better off if you're good at any one thing to just sort of really double down and dig into that deeply so that you can be competitive. And it's not just music, if it's, if you're a sound designer, or if it's orchestration, or, if it's
it should be maybe it's accounting or something, maybe you're not there with your music or your sound design yet, but you're like, man, I'm really good at organizing, or I'm really good. If you can provide value from day one to somebody, there's your foot in the door, and you can then continue on and learn from there, and you can build that skill set. But sort of just that singular, I am pro at this thing and I'm great at it, it was a huge door opener for us early in our careers.
Because it was really just musical sound design and synthesis stuff, just because had the experience and some skills in that, but that was just sort of the beginning. That just allowed us to get in the door to then be able to do other things and grow and learn from there. And then, it's another thing is to tap into your knowledge of other things. So like Brian was saying, his accounting comes in quite handy for us, but even the teaching I think about a lot, because not only was it, for expanding our team, finding good people, but you kind of never stop teaching. When you're working with people, you're the person on something with the most sort of your head in the details, and you have to communicate that to other people. And it's, having those skills to patiently explain it and clearly explain it is pretty important. So for both of us, teaching was very, valuable thing. I think another thing that's pretty important too is, to run kind of a lean operation. So, because here's the thing, like everything, there's like booms and busts, and a lot of people overextend when they have like a great year, or it's like, oh, the stock market's up, or crypto's going through the moon, and it's like, and they buy a boat, and then it's like the dark winter, and you have to be able to survive that. So for us, when we were building our business up, it was figuring out like, okay, instead of like getting some cool studio space and like looking like cool dudes, like we don't have a studio space. We just both work from our own homes, and our whole team, they just all work from home forever, like before COVID. And, we spend that on like the people, like taking care of the people, like expanding our team, and, just like the things that are going to provide value, not just like cool bro stuff. And then the other thing is you got to be flexible too with things, because like a lot of stuff, like a lot of these projects, it's like you're kind of like building the plane as it's flying, or like you're literally falling out of the plane and you have to figure out how to land. And so, you have to try to be adaptable and, just like learn stuff, be comfortable in the deep end.
All right, so embrace being different. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to be pretty quick here. So find your sonic superpower. That just means like, dig into your identity, dig into whatever you think makes you special. Don't worry about what's normal. Don't worry about what other people are doing so much. I think we tend to everybody tends to chase sounds and chase trends. And I think that one thing that's really helped us sort of in our careers is sort of like cultivating a bold taste in sound and music. So sometimes just sounding different is better than sounding better, if that makes any sense, right? Sometimes everybody's kind of doing the same thing, and if you can do something different, it's better because it's different. And so I think, we can kind of get all wrapped up in the same techniques right now that there's YouTube and all this learning stuff, but, I think just think about being different. And I think part of being different is curating all of the knowledge that comes in. There's so much knowledge, including this talk, right? I'm saying including this. So curate all your tips, tricks, and advice, right? There's so much stuff that I'll go watch on the internet with hindsight, and I'll be like, oh man, like I don't necessarily agree with that. But I have the wisdom to kind of go, yeah, that's not for me. I'm going to do this. When you're younger, when I was younger, I just would read a book or something and be like, oh, that's how you EQ this, or that's how that's how you orchestrate this kind of thing. I guess that's it, because the book says so. You don't question it. I think a big part of learning how to learn is what I call it, is curating the knowledge that you take in, in terms of all of it. Because the world is filled with tips, tricks, and advice. And so you just definitely want to filter that through. This is it. That's all.
And sort of related to what Brian's talking about, sounding different, like we spend a lot of energy just investing in our own sonic research and development, and that's well worth it, because, sometimes things that seem like it would be some experiment that wastes a day, if you get like one good sound out of that you can use, or one new technique, like that really can be useful. And there's stuff that we've sort of discovered from really making an effort to do our just like allowing the space to try experiments that have been like techniques that we still use, that we I've never seen a tutorial about. I don't know that anyone else does. And, not that it's like some amazing thing that sounds better, but it's just, you end up with like unique ideas and sort of unique things. And part of doing that is you have to get comfortable with the idea of allowing yourself to suck. So one of the things that I learned from working with people that were kind of well known early in my career is that like they suck just as much as I do, but they like get through their sucky ideas and they turn it into something good like pretty quickly. And that's what it's about. Like you have to just start somewhere and then, explore it deeply. And so, one thing, and Brian was talking about online tutorials, is like, if you just watch a tutorial, you will get from point A to B, like how to make this bass sound. But you don't get the whole wisdom of when you have to just experiment and you don't know the answer, there is no answer key and you have to figure it out. And the analogy that we talk about is it's kind of like if you drive everywhere with GPS. Yes, you get from point A to point B reliably, but you don't have any sense usually of how the neighborhoods connect and how all the little neat stuff on the side streets. And now driving, I don't really care about that. But with music and sound design and all of that, that's a big part of it. It's understanding the whole neighborhood and how everything ties together. So yeah, you don't want to go too hard with the toots.
This is just a little quote that supports that concept.
Truth. Facts.
All right, find great help. So identify and build a team of superheroes that you can call up, sort of like Batlight style. We've seen a lot of people sort of, especially younger in careers, us included, being too proud about, we got to make every sound, every single thing has to come out of these fingers, this mind. And it's exhausting, right? While hiring awesome people makes you look amazing. So that's a pro tip we kind of learned. Plus, other people get to be part of the team, and you get other ideas, other perspectives, other disciplines. People who are so good at that one thing, right? That idea of being really good at that one thing. Hire that person, right? And they can make your project amazing. And to that end, I want to encourage people to cultivate an actual skill of building and empowering great teams. So that is to say, cultivate a skill of being a good team leader, being a good manager, because I think a lot of people, as they get experience in their careers, they get handed managerial roles without any sort of training on supporting teams beneath them. It's a different skill, managing people, managing them well, taking care of them, making sure they're okay. And I think that can get lost sometimes, sort of as you're sort of a professional that then ascends into a managerial role. So there's tons of information out there on the internet and books and things like that. I think a lot of people don't actually tap into that, especially in this field as much as they should in sort of the audio world. So just something to think about. Little Captain Planet
reference. Yeah. So, and I do definitely want to shout out our team, like Jay Wilson and Alex Klingel. They're just they make our lives so much better. They're a big part of the projects. So we're so grateful to have found them. So another very important thing is, you curate a solid work-life balance. And it's going to look different at different phases of your life and career. In your 20s, you might be okay with really grinding really hard 24/7. But you can't keep up that pace forever. And, I think especially in the COVID world, you start to realize that, people in the present is important and, it's a priority. So it's we turn down opportunities, especially in the past, or whole different avenues outside of games that maybe could have been pretty lucrative, but just because we knew it's this is not going to work. Require a 24/7 grind. And, I think it's important to also figure out, if you don't like doing something or working with certain people, you can't always necessarily give that up immediately, but you can start to steer the ship away from that. If you recognize they're man, I really we don't like working on commercials. You might not be able to stop immediately, but you can realize, okay, I'm going to try to find other things that are not that. Or if you have there's people you don't like working with, you can go, okay, I'm going to try, hopefully, to work on, different projects with different folks. And so related to all that, too, it's very important to prioritize your relationships, both personal and business. Your family, that matters. If you have kids, that's your world. It has to be. It's more important than anything else, And with business, you have to think about the people that you've built trust with, you've built these long-term relationships with, and that, they're going to be the ones that, like continue to bring you stuff and recommend you, and you know it's worth prioritizing. And then of course you want to pay attention to your physical and mental health, and I think a lot of people they think they can put that off into the future, but like you're never going to be younger in your life right now than you are right now, and it's going to be harder as you get older, especially with physical health, to change things. There's more sort of momentum against that. So, and your mental health, it's like, it can be life or death. So it's like, that stuff's important to pay attention to. If there's situations you're in where it's not working for you, it's important to take care of those things. And last but not least with this, it's like, you gotta be kind. Especially now, there's like a lot of ambient stress in the world. There's a lot of stuff going on, and people have a lot going on, and it's just always good. It's just, just be understanding and patient with people. So we have a Dalai Lama quote here for that. Then
yeah, I can just add.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time, so we're going to go through this pretty quick. Focusing on the big picture. So identify the big picture of the project, right? Realize that sort of making a solo album, a very personal thing where you have every decision that you can make, versus sort of making a video game with a team of maybe over 1,000 people is a different thing. So in that, you just have to just recognize that. Put yourself in that mindset, right? You can't control everything, so you need to be flexible. Also be flexible with yourself. So you might not always agree on aesthetics, and sometimes you might be right, but the idea is it's a team sport, especially making games. Making films and TV is also very, very much a team sport, but with games, it's just like we spend like 2, 3, 4, 5 years on these projects. And everybody's just trying to do their best, right? And sometimes the communication doesn't flow correctly. Sometimes there's bugs, hitches, things like that. So always keep that in mind when you're working on projects. And also to that end, it's rarely personal, right? So if you're getting notes or feedback or things like that, even if it seems like, oh man, this is like a personal affront to my aesthetic, it's usually not. Usually it's just like maybe you don't see eye to eye on something, and realize that's another human that's just trying to do their best. They have a vision, they're trying to put something out there into the world that they think people are going to enjoy, and you really just have to be flexible in that. And if you build that into your sort of self and you have that flexibility, willpower, it makes sleeping at night way easier.
So we're gonna kind of wrap things up here. We've just got this little thing. Be careful on social media. Embrace the journey, be open to different opportunities, find good mentors, be a good mentor. Don't have your relationships just be transactional. You're trying to build long-term with people. We have another just meme format here. So, final points here. Learn to manage the expectations versus reality. Be open to pivoting. Find mentors and collaborators, even in strange places like GameSound Con. Identify your superpowers and exploit it. Turn losses into wins, and wins into more wins. Take chances on new things, even if they scare you or you aren't ready. You got to get used to just swimming in the deep end. Build a great team. Be great to them. Cultivate and cherish your relationships for the long haul, and then deliver. Got to do what you say, mean what you say, and that's gonna take you a long way. And thank you.